Hey everyone, welcome back to the Radical Care for Christian Counselors podcast. I'm so excited that you're here. And just to make sure that you're in this right place, we say this every week. Yes, the Radical Care for Christian Counselors podcast is for Christian counselors, mental health professionals, pastoral care leaders who are in the regular routine with meeting with clients day in, day out, but also want to work with groups and really go deeper in those groups to have transformational impact. But it's also for moms and dads and youth pastors and coaches, really anyone that wants to really take any kind of group that they're a part of, whether it's 2 people, 6 people, 8 people, whether it's a church of people, you really want to have deeper level conversations. You're tired of staying on the surface, but how do we go deep with people and actually make it a safe environment for God to move like the ways that we know He can? We're right in the middle of our Cognitive Distortion series, and we explained back at the beginning a couple episodes ago, which you can go check that out if you have some time, that cognitive distortions are very much the way that we think. And we just like that first verse says, take every thought captive. These cognitive distortions are like little filters that we can kind of filter our thoughts through. But also here on this podcast, as we focus on group environments, we're focused on, hey, if we hear these thoughts, if we hear somebody saying these things, we can actually kind of ask curious questions around that. Because if we can label these cognitive distortions, we can help them understand maybe about more what's going on in their heart, but also a different way of reframing and looking at the environment. Today is I'm laughing because it's actually one of the ones that I struggle with the most. And I found in my practice a lot of times that those of us that love to move forward fast, that love goal setting, that love achieving things, many times we fall for this. The one today is about jumping to conclusions or even assuming without really checking out all the really valid information. So a good example of this is that anytime I text someone, and usually it's one of those situations where I know I can't call them. In my earlier life, I hated calling anyone. And when text came out, it was just like the invitation to me to send the most hardest messages on text that I could. And as I've grown, I've learned that that's not the thing to do, that you always want to call or even meet with that person face to face to have these difficult conversations. But once in a while, you have to text, and it might not be the greatest opportunity to text, but you just have to. It's just something has happened where you have to text. A call is not going to happen. Maybe the person isn't accepting calls right now, but you're pretty sure they'll read the text. Whatever. If you're an iPhone user, you know what I'm talking about when you see the dot, 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 these little bubbles. So you know the person's responding on the other end, but you haven't received it yet. It is the most, oh my goodness, torturous experience for me, especially if I send a text and if I need an answer, and especially if it's a hard text and maybe I'm admitting something and I'm waiting for that person to answer and you see those bubbles. And then I would watch them disappear, and then nothing would come through. I'm like, send the text. Just send the text already. And I am just, my mind is blowing up in so many different directions. You all, I've been known in the past when I've done this, when the bubbles come up, and if I don't hear a response, I'll just like, so I'm assuming this means, like, I literally put that in the text. I'm assuming this means that. And especially if it was one of those things that I needed to move forward on, I just automatically assumed that they meant to do something because they weren't moving at my speed. This got me in a lot of trouble. And I'm a very nice person. I feel like I'm a nice person anyway. And when people would get those texts from me, it was not the type of person that they knew and loved. And so I eventually had a good, very wise friend who meant so much to me, came up to me and said, can we talk about something? And I said, sure. And we sat down and we had coffee, and I could tell I trusted this friend. And so we speak truth to one another. And they said, okay, you remember that other day where I sent a text to you? And I said, yes, I do. And I just kind of went right into my story, which I still struggle with. Because they hadn't even shared with me what was bothering them. And I went all the way into the story and how I was waiting and I needed this response and how I just had to assume because I had to get this thing done. And this person let me sit there and go through my whole story with them. And finally they said, okay, well, this was what was happening on my end. They just had a family member that passed away. They didn't want to send out on text because they literally couldn't, and everything in the world was crashing down. And I was so focused on the one thing that I needed done. I completely lost sight of what was going on in the world. That really jolted me because this person had a way of explaining how it was for them and how it felt for them without casting blame or without casting shame on me. Instead, they were just saying, hey, Bethany, this is how I received what was going on. And I know you didn't know this, but this is what was going on. And it was such a loving way of doing it, but it also reminded me like, wow, I have no idea what's happening on the other end. And just because those dots are there doesn't mean that they're working on a text even. Who knows what's going on the other end? And if I really do need an answer to something, if it's really that important to me, then I can call or I can reach out in other ways. Assuming never gets us in the right place. This jumping to conclusions never gets us in the right place. So what do we do? What do we do in these circumstances where we're like, we find ourselves just jumping into conclusions, usually gets us into trouble? What do we do? First of all, one thing that I've done is I've allowed people to speak into that because I know that's a struggle of mine. Because I almost feel like if I can get ahead, then I can almost protect myself and I can get to whatever else I need done. And so I ask people, if you see me doing that and you see me getting in this forward motion where I need to stop, please, please, you have my permission. You can speak into that. You can tell me truth if that's happening to me. The second thing I've done is because I've done enough work on myself where I realize when I get to that motion where I need to get stuff done, I've noticed that I can take my eyes off of everything that's going on around me and just focus right on that task that needs to get done, which is healthy in some senses, but also not in many others, especially when you're assuming. It's not a good combination when you are focusing on one small thing and you take the reality of everything else out of context and you're assuming. Don't do that. I need to tell myself, like, don't do that. So one thing I've realized is I've known what my body literally feels like when I get into those modes, and I allow myself to step back and go, okay, wait a second. Take a quick walk, pay attention, and I make myself physically move because I found out when I'm sitting down, I literally can go right back into that mindset of, okay, I got to get this done. But when I physically get up and I make myself move, and I'll set a timer for like 5 minutes or 10 minutes, depending on what it is, and I get myself out, I'm able to look at different things that are going on and realizing that there's more to this world than that one little thing that I have to get done. And two, it allows me to not assume. And it really puts things back into perspective for me. So I'm able to take a deep breath, realize life does not revolve around me. I know, big shocker. And it also allows me to just get grounded with God and say, God, I am really concerned about this right now. And I know that's probably not healthy. It's causing me stress. I realize I'm getting tight in my shoulders. I realize I'm losing grasp on even like what time it is. And I really want this done. Can you help me wrestle with why this is so important to me right now? Can you speak value into me about who I am, regardless if this thing gets done or not? Can you just meet with me? Those are really powerful questions that have helped me out tremendously in this. But a lot of times it's actually allowing us to step back and get curious, especially if it's something that we're dealing with another person, and get curious about there's different ways of viewing this one thing that's happening. So you can't always just jump to conclusions, but allow yourself to get curious. And when you do jump to conclusions and you get it wrong, which if you're like me, that happens all the time, you can get really good at apologizing. I've gotten really good at apologizing, especially with my kids as well. It's happened many times. I'm sorry. I love you. Will you forgive me? I'm sorry, I was wrong. I love you. Will you forgive me? Some of the most powerful words that you can do. We'll do a totally different episode on that. I've got a lot of experience in that category. But again, this is one of those other cognitive distortions to really think about. So, your challenge this week, and again, I've been talking about my journal entries and how I've been doing all this and how I've journaled with AI, which has brought some really interesting conversations. So, I'm not saying you have to do this at all. Please hear me. This is just one thing that's helped me out in my life. And to answer one more question, I do not do this with every single journal entry. I don't put the whole journal entry in there. I just put some of the tidbits that I'm noticing and just put it in there. And that way it can recall and help me find these patterns that I'm doing. The more you become aware of these cognitive distortions, the more you can hear them in other people and get curious with them and practice it with them. But also, before you can practice it with others, you need to really sit with it yourself. And that takes work and that takes time and that takes progress. So, again, the Rosebud link is down below. That's the journal thing that I used with AI to kind of understand my patterns. So you can check that out. Also, the PDF of Cognitive Distortions is down below as well. So check that out. And as always, so glad that you're here. Feel free to join the community. You can check out bethanyboring.com or stepoutandthrive.com for the whole website. You can get connected at either one of those places, and I cannot wait for you to come back next week. So remember, dare to do more than just survive. Step out and thrive. Have an amazing week, guys. Bye.